Hidden deep in one of the driest, emptiest places in the United States sits a facility that the government didn't publicly acknowledge until 2013, a place chosen not just for secrecy, but because the land itself created the perfect shield. Most people focus on the mysteries inside Area 51, but the most surprising truth lies outside it, in the vast Nevada desert that made the site possible. In the far southern reaches of Nevada, about 120 kilometers northwest of Las Vegas, sits a remote U.S. Air Force installation officially known as Groom Lake or Homey Airport. The world knows it by a different name, Area 51. From satellite images, it appears as a cluster of runways and structures surrounded by an endless desert basin. To outsiders, it seems quiet, motionless, almost forgotten. But its isolation hides decades of testing, research, and technological development carried out under extreme secrecy. This is not the story of conspiracies or rumors. This is the story of how a remote desert landscape shaped one of the most restricted military zones in the world, how the facility grew across decades, and how the Nevada desert played a crucial role in American aviation history. The story of Area 51 begins not with the military, but with miners. In the early 1900s, the Groom Lake area was part of Nevada's mining frontier. Small operations extracted lead and silver from the surrounding mountains, but the harsh desert environment and limited resources meant these ventures never prospered. By the 1930s, the mines had been abandoned, leaving behind only a flat, dry lakebed and an endless silence.
In 1955, U.S. intelligence agencies were looking for a remote place to test a new aircraft, one that needed to remain completely hidden. The aircraft was the Lockheed U-2 reconnaissance plane, designed for high-altitude surveillance during the Cold War. The Groom Lake site was chosen for three reasons: distance from civilian populations, reducing the chance of unwanted observation; natural barriers, mountains acted as visual shields for takeoffs and landings; flat, dry lakebed, perfect for long, improvised runways. Construction began quickly. Workers built simple structures, hangars, and a runway on the edge of the salt flat. Thus began the first official use of Area 51.
Everything changed in 1955. The Cold War was intensifying, and the United States desperately needed better intelligence on Soviet military capabilities. The CIA and Lockheed Corporation had been developing the U-2, a high-altitude reconnaissance aircraft designed to fly at 70,000 feet, far above the reach of Soviet fighters and missiles. But this revolutionary plane needed a testing site that met very specific requirements: isolation, flat terrain for emergency landings, and proximity to existing military support infrastructure. Lockheed's lead test pilot, Tony LeVere, along with CIA officials and engineers, scouted locations across the American Southwest. When they flew over Groom Lake in April 1955, they immediately recognized its potential. The dry lakebed stretched for miles, providing a natural runway that could handle any aircraft. The surrounding mountains offered natural barriers against observation, and the existing military range meant security could be easily established and maintained. Within months, the CIA, working through the Atomic Energy Commission to maintain secrecy, acquired the land and began construction. The initial facility was remarkably basic: a single 5,000-foot runway made from compacted earth, 3 hangars constructed from surplus World War II materials, a control tower, and temporary housing for about a dozen personnel. The workers who built this initial facility had no idea what would be tested there. They were simply told they were constructing a remote testing site, and security clearances were strictly compartmentalized. The name Area 51 came from the site's designation on Atomic Energy Commission maps, which divided the Nevada test site into numbered grid areas. Groom Lake fell within Area 51 of these maps. The designation was purely administrative, but it stuck. Internally, personnel referred to it as the Ranch, Paradise Ranch, or simply Groom Lake. The first U-2 test flight occurred on August 4, 1955, just 4 months after site selection. What followed was an intensive period of development. Pilots pushed the aircraft to its limits in the desert sky, testing everything from engine performance at extreme altitudes to the effectiveness of radar-absorbing materials. The success of the U-2 program validated the site's purpose and established Area 51 as the premier location for testing classified aircraft. In the early 1960s, the facility expanded dramatically. The CIA and the Air Force began developing the A-12 Oxcart, a Mach 3+ reconnaissance aircraft made primarily of titanium and designed to fly even higher and faster than the U-2. This program required substantial infrastructure improvements. The original dirt runway was paved and extended to 8,800 feet. New hangars were constructed with specialized features to accommodate the A-12's unusual shape and exotic materials. Fuel storage facilities were built to handle the aircraft's unique JP-7 fuel. Housing expanded to accommodate hundreds of personnel, including pilots, engineers, mechanics, and security staff. During this period, Area 51 operated on a rigid schedule designed to minimize detection. Test flights typically occurred in the early morning or late evening when visibility from distant roads was poorest. Personnel lived on site during their work rotations, which typically lasted several weeks. Communication with the outside world was strictly limited. Family members were told only that their loved ones worked at a remote government facility in Nevada, nothing more. The facility continued to evolve throughout the Cold War. In the 1970s and 1980s, Area 51 became the testing ground for captured Soviet aircraft acquired through various intelligence operations. American pilots flew these aircraft to understand their capabilities and develop effective countermeasures. This program, known internally as Have Donut and later Constant Peg, remained classified for decades. The development of stealth technology brought another wave of expansion. The F-117 Nighthawk, the world's first operational stealth aircraft, conducted all of its initial flight testing at Area 51 between 1981 and 1983. The facility's infrastructure grew to include larger hangars with specialized radar-absorbing features, advanced radar monitoring equipment to test stealth characteristics, and expanded housing and support facilities for the growing workforce. By the 1990s, Area 51 had transformed from a temporary testing site into a permanent, highly sophisticated military installation. The runway had been extended to 12,000 feet, long enough for any aircraft in the American inventory. The base included over a dozen large hangars, extensive underground facilities, hundreds of buildings ranging from workshops to administrative offices, and housing for potentially thousands of personnel. Here's what makes Area 51 truly unique, beyond the obvious secrecy. It's one of the few places on Earth where engineers could test revolutionary technology in complete isolation while maintaining immediate access to advanced support infrastructure. Most people focus on the main paved runway, but the real engineering marvel is the lakebed itself. Groom Lake's dry lakebed covers approximately 12 square miles of perfectly flat terrain. When conditions are right, typically late spring through early fall, this entire surface becomes a natural runway harder than concrete and smoother than almost any human-made surface. This wasn't just convenient, it was essential. When testing experimental aircraft, especially those pushing the boundaries of known technology, engineers needed backup landing options. If an aircraft experienced problems during takeoff or landing, the lakebed provided multiple miles of emergency landing surface in virtually any direction. Test pilots could abort a landing and immediately touch down on the lakebed without having to circle back around. The lakebed's composition also made it ideal for testing radar cross-sections. Unlike concrete or asphalt, which can create reflections that interfere with radar measurements, the natural clay surface absorbed or scattered radar energy in predictable ways. Engineers could position aircraft on the lakebed and measure their radar signatures from multiple angles without environmental interference.
Here's something rarely discussed in detail. How did hundreds of workers commute to one of America's most secret facilities? The answer is a fleet of unmarked Boeing 737 aircraft known colloquially as Janet flights. The name possibly derives from Joint Air Network for Employee Transportation, though this has never been officially confirmed. Every weekday morning, these white aircraft with red stripes depart from a decorated terminal at Las Vegas's McCarran International Airport, now called Harry Reid International Airport. The terminal has no signage, just a parking lot with high fences. Workers show their credentials, board the aircraft, and fly for approximately 40 minutes to Groom Lake. The aircraft windows are fitted with blackout shades that must remain closed during landing and takeoff, preventing passengers from seeing the facility's layout. This system has operated continuously since the 1970s, transporting an estimated 3,000 to 4,000 workers daily during peak operational periods. It represents one of the largest classified commuter operations in the world, hiding in plain sight at one of America's busiest tourist airports. Much of Area 51's most sensitive infrastructure exists underground. These spaces provided climate-controlled environments for aircraft maintenance, protection from Soviet satellite surveillance, and facilities for specialized radar and engine testing. Former workers have described underground tunnels connecting various hangars, allowing personnel and equipment to move across the base without exposure to overhead observation. Extending north from the main facility is an extensive radar measurement range where engineers validated stealth technology. Aircraft would taxi to specific positions on the lakebed. Radar transmitters at various distances would illuminate the aircraft, while receivers measured how much energy bounced back. By rotating the aircraft and repeating measurements from dozens of angles, engineers created detailed maps of radar signatures. This testing was extraordinarily precise. The difference between detectable and invisible often came down to the angle of a panel or the materials used in specific locations. Area 51 sits at the center of a restricted area spanning 4,000 square miles. The nearest public viewpoint is Tikaboo Peak, 26 miles away. Security personnel patrol the perimeter constantly. The terrain itself provides natural security. Surrounding mountains create barriers, and the harsh desert environment discourages exploration. Today, Area 51 remains an active military installation, officially acknowledged but still highly restricted. The U.S. Air Force now publicly confirms the base's existence and its role as a testing facility for classified aircraft and weapons systems, though specific details about current operations remain protected. The facility continues to expand. Recent satellite imagery reveals ongoing construction, with new hangars and support buildings continuing to emerge. The Janet flight system still operates daily, transporting thousands of workers between Las Vegas and Groom Lake.
The 12,000-foot runway stays in excellent condition, and aircraft movements are regularly observed, though their types remain difficult to identify. Security has intensified in recent years. Additional fencing, cameras, and sensors line the perimeter. The restricted airspace has expanded, and trespassing attempts result in immediate detention and federal charges. Public interest has transformed the surrounding area. The town of Rachel, Nevada, sits along the extraterrestrial highway, State Route 375. Its Little A-Lay Inn serves as an unofficial visitor center. Tikaboo Peak, 26 miles from the base, remains the only legal viewpoint where hikers with telescopes can observe the facility's structures and occasional aircraft movements. In 2013, the CIA officially acknowledged Area 51's existence and released declassified documents about the U-2 and A-12 programs. However, operations from the past 40 years remain classified. The base continues testing next-generation aircraft and weapons systems. Its isolation and infrastructure are still ideal for America's most sensitive military projects.
In the end, Area 51 is not defined by rumors, but by geography, engineering, and history. It is the story of a dry lakebed in the Nevada desert that became the stage for aviation innovation, a place where isolation shaped purpose and where the landscape itself became part of the design. Quiet, remote, and surrounded by endless desert plains, it remains one of the most unique research sites in the world, a reminder that sometimes the most extraordinary stories emerge not from speculation, but from the land that makes them possible.
Thank you for watching. See you in the next documentary.